It's an honor and a privilege to introduce our next featured presenter, Dr. Don Thomas, NASA astronaut. He's been on 4 space shuttle missions, STS 65, 70, 83, and 94. That's a remarkable accomplishment for an astronaut. And I think the thing to say here is that what Dr. Thomas is going to tell you is such a powerful story that it's a life lesson. And I think every young researcher in this audience should carefully listen to what he has to say, because this is something you ought to embrace lifelong. It's such a powerful message that I think, Don, we've now had you talk at the conference 4 times, and we're going to continue to, we're going to break your STS, your shuttle record, and we're going to continue to invite you here because you're part of this family now. And what you are doing for the next generation in terms of giving them advice and counsel and inspiring them is really remarkable. So it's an honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Don Thomas.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody here? Hey, Jeff, you got another great group of students this year. I'm so proud to be here. As you heard, this is my 4th time here. And when I was your age, for our students here, when I was your age, this is 50 years ago, I could only watch other researchers send their experiments to space. So the opportunities you have today are so incredible, and I'm envious of your youth and the opportunities that you have. Besides being an astronaut, I was also the space station program scientist for 3 years, from about 2003 to 2006. And in that capacity, my job was to help schedule and coordinate and plan the experiments that we did up on the International Space Station. And of all the experiments that we would ever send to the ISS, my favorites were always the student experiments, because you really represent the future. You have such enthusiasm. And it was always with great pleasure that we launched your experiments and had the astronauts perform them up in space. So what I'm going to tell you about this morning, I'm going to talk about overcoming obstacles and reaching for the stars. And I start with this picture here. This is not a picture of me, but it very well could have been me. I was just 6 years old when the first American astronaut launched into space. That was a long time ago. May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard launched on a Redstone rocket. And at my elementary school in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, they brought all the students to our gymnasium. I sat on the floor, and I watched the small black and white TV of the launch that day. And as soon as our astronaut was in space, I remember sitting there saying to myself, I want to do that. So ever since I was a little boy, I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to ride on a rocket. I wanted to experience zero gravity floating around in space. So I always knew what I wanted to do. The problem is, well, how do you get there? How do you get from point A, I want to be an astronaut, to point B, I'm up in space? And as a young boy, I wasn't quite sure how to accomplish this. There were only 7 American astronauts at that time, and I didn't know any of them. But the one thing I recognized early on was it was going to be very difficult. It's very competitive. Thousands of people apply to become an astronaut, and then NASA selects a small handful of those. So I knew the only shot that I would ever have of going into space would involve me working hard and doing my best in school every single day. And for our students here, have you ever heard that advice before? Work hard, do your best, work hard, do your best. Have you ever heard that? We hear it every day, you know, from our teachers, our principals, our parents. And it really is excellent advice, because you never know when something you're learning today is going to help you in the future. In elementary school, I was an average student. I got mainly B's, a few C's, and a few A's. In middle school, I started working a lot harder on my schoolwork. I was getting A's and B's. And by the time I got to high school, I was really focused on my schoolwork, and I had nearly straight A's. I had 1 B in high school, the rest A's. And I got those grades not because I'm the smartest guy in the world, but because I worked really hard. I've got a fraternal twin brother who's like a genius. He never had to study at all, and he would get straight A's like that. I was one of those students that had to read the chapter, read it again, go talk to my teacher. But in the end, I learned everything I needed to learn, and I learned how to work hard along the way, which is a great skill later on in my career. After high school, I went on to college. I went to Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, and I got my bachelor's degree in physics. And that's a minimum degree you need to become an astronaut. 4-year college degree in math, science, engineering, or the medical field. But again, I knew the competition was going to be tough, and I decided, I can't start applying with just the bare minimum requirements. So I stayed in school. I went to Cornell University and got my master's and then my doctorate in engineering. So after about 9.5 years of university, I got out. I took a job in Princeton, New Jersey with a company called AT&T, Bell Laboratories, doing research work for them. And this was in the early 1980s, just about when NASA was starting to launch our space shuttle. So my timing, as it turns out to be, was perfect. And NASA selects new astronauts every 3 or 4 years. They'll pick a small group of 10, 15, or 20, depending on their needs. And 2 years after I got out of college, NASA put that announcement out there, we're looking for new astronauts. I was all excited. I wrote to them. I got an application form. I filled it out. I mailed it back in. And I never heard anything back from NASA that time. It was about 8 months later, I was reading the New York Times, and there was a little article in there. And the headline said, NASA selects 15 new astronauts. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. They didn't call me. And I quickly read the article, and my name wasn't on that list. And that's when I got the first sense of how difficult this was going to be. I didn't give up. I decided I'd try again. And 2 years later, there was another astronaut selection. Sent my application in, and this time I heard back from NASA. I got a little postcard, and it started off saying, "Dear Sir and/or Madam." You know where we're heading with this. It said, "Thank you very much for applying. We had a lot of good candidates. We didn't select you, but good luck in the future." I looked at that postcard, and I thought, my grandmother and I have the same chance of becoming an astronaut. That chance was 0. I wasn't even getting close in the competition. So I decided I need to do more to get noticed by NASA. And what I did, being an engineer, I studied the data. I studied the backgrounds of the people that were successful getting into the program, because I wanted to see, what do they have that I don't have? What background, what experiences, what education? And I thought maybe if I could learn, what they have and I don't have, I could model my career, along their lines, and maybe I'll be successful then. So by studying all that, I learned a few important things. The first was, most of the civilian astronauts that NASA was selecting, they already had some flying experience. It wasn't a requirement, but it seemed to help a little bit. So I took flying lessons and got my pilot's license. Most of the astronauts that they were selecting had some skydiving or parachuting experience. So I learned to do that. I taught a university course. That seemed to be experience NASA was looking for. I learned to scuba dive. And my thought was, maybe I can do enough of these little things that help just a little bit, that maybe they'll add up, and for that next selection, I'll be head and shoulders above the other candidates. I worked on all those activities. 3 years later, there was another astronaut selection. I sent my application in. And this time, NASA called me up, and they invited me down to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, for a week of medical testing and an interview. And out of the thousands of people that apply to be an astronaut, NASA will select about 100 individuals. They bring you down to the Johnson Space Center, and you spend a full week there on a very thorough medical exam. And then after that, there's a 1-hour interview. I passed all the medical tests. I went on to the interview. That went very well. And at the end of the week, I went back to my job in New Jersey and just sat there and waited to see, did I make it or not? I was back at my job about a week or so when some of my friends started calling me up from across the United States. And they called up and they said, "Hey, Don, the FBI's been calling about you." And let me tell you, if the FBI's ever calling about you, it's either really good or really bad. In this case, it was really good. NASA was doing a security background check on me, and they looked into my background. They went and talked to every employer wherever I worked from high school on, talking to my former bosses, asking, hey, what kind of worker was he? How did he treat the coworkers? How did he treat the customers? Did he show up to work on time? They went up and down the streets in any neighborhood, wherever I lived, talking to neighbors on either side and stopping random people on the streets asking about me. And when I heard this was going on, I thought, this is a great sign. NASA couldn't be doing this detailed security background check on all 100 people they interviewed. I figured they must have selected their candidates, and this was the final security check to make sure you were good to go before they announced the names. So I was very excited when a month later I got the phone call from NASA, and they called and said, Don, thank you very much for applying. We had a lot of good candidates. We didn't select you, but good luck in the future. I hung up that phone and I was devastated. I thought I had made it in, but here for the third time, NASA said no. First time was no, second time was no, third time they interviewed interviewed me and got to know me, but the result was the same, big no. So there was a big message for me from NASA, right? We don't want you. And that's the way I felt. So I decided it was time to give up on that silly dream of going into space. And I decided I would go to bed, get a good night's sleep, and then in the morning when I woke up, I would put together a new plan for my career that did not involve being an astronaut. I went to bed that night. The next morning when I woke up, the very first thought that popped into my head was, I still want to be an astronaut. And I asked myself, are there any more of these little things that I can do that might improve my chances? And again, by studying who NASA was selecting, who they weren't selecting, it was clear to me that most of the civilians they were picking, they were already working at one of the NASA centers, and most of them were working down at the Johnson Space Center down in Houston. So I quit my job. I drove down to Houston. I got a job as an engineer working on the space shuttle program. Did that for 3 years. And then there was another astronaut selection. This is number 4. Sent my application in. I got called up for medical testing and the interviews once again, and that all went very well. And this time, it was about 2 months later, I got another phone call from NASA. And this time they said, Don, are you still interested in being an astronaut? Because we'd like to offer you the job. I said something very intelligent. You can quote me on this. I said, habita, 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 habita. I finally got the words yes out of my mouth. I hung up the phone. And then I was jumping up and down, yelling and screaming for 10 minutes because I knew I made it into the program. I didn't know when I would fly, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. There's no guarantee, but I knew I was in line. I'm in the queue to go into space. So it was a really exciting moment to get that phone call. I was 35 years old when I got that call, and I started a 4-year training program for my first flight. So the first time I made it to space, I was 39 years old. For our students here, that's pretty much like an old man, right? 39? But some of the careers you will pick, it will take time to get there. So I just want to share with you, like, it will take time. Work hard. Do your best every day. And my most important message is to never give up on your dream. I almost gave up on mine after being turned down that 3rd time. And had I done that, I wouldn't be here today sharing with you some of the experiences I had in space. So I hope all of you will continue the excellent work you've been doing, work hard, and you can accomplish your dream just like I did. And I went on to fly a total of 4 missions. This is the crew from my last flight, and the last time I was in space was 21 years ago already, in July of 1997. This is the crew from that mission. We've got 2 military pilots in the front row to help us fly the shuttle. On the left-hand side with the helmet is our commander, Jim Halsell. He was an Air Force test pilot. On the right-hand side with the helmet is our pilot. Her name is Susan Still. And Susan was a pretty unique individual. She was only the 2nd woman to pilot the space shuttle. And Susan was one of our country's top Navy fighter pilots, so it was a great opportunity for me to fly with her. And then in the background, we've got 5 of our science astronauts. We're called mission specialists and payload specialists. Our job is to do the science on board. We work the robotic arm. We deploy satellites and do spacewalks. So we each have our area of specialty on the crew. You probably don't recognize that guy on the far right-hand side, but sadly, that's how I looked 21 years ago before glasses, gray hair, wrinkles, and a few pounds around the middle here. There's the shuttle on the launch pad. I took this picture the night before my first mission. Went out there about midnight or so with another one of the astronauts, and it was so incredible just to stand at the base of the space shuttle, gazing up at it. And as I stood there, I had incredible butterflies in my stomach. You know, I don't know if you ever get butterflies, but I was a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, but mainly really excited because I knew in 12 hours I would be sitting inside that thing blasting off. So 3 hours before liftoff, they bring us out to the launch pad. We take an elevator up, and then before we climb on board, we get put on a parachute harness. They do a last-minute check of our equipment. They strap us into our seats, and once we're all strapped in there, they close and seal that round hatch. And it's very quiet for us inside up until 6 seconds before liftoff, when the 3 big main engines, one of which you see right here, start coming up to full power. 6 seconds later, our big solid rocket booster, the big white rockets, ignite. And immediately, I felt that push in my back. And it felt to me as if somebody had their hand in the middle of my back and they were just pushing me up into the sky. And that's what the shuttle is doing. 8.5 minutes later, the engine shut down. It's perfectly quiet and you're in space. It's always amazing to me. It only took 8.5 minutes to get to space. It takes way longer than that to get a parking spot near the Air and Space Museum, if you've ever checked that out. In 8.5 minutes, you can be 200 miles above the Earth, and at this point, we're traveling at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. That turns out to be 5 miles a second. So imagine how fast you could get home at the end of this conference if you could travel 5 miles a second. If you came from California, far away, it would probably take you 7.5 minutes to get home. And we go so fast that we orbit the Earth, we go all around in only an hour and a half. On 3 of my missions, we had a science module that you see in the back of this image, in the back of the payload bay. It was called Space Lab. And once we got to space, we would float through a tunnel, go back there and operate many different science experiments. And during a 2-week mission, we would typically do 100 to 200 different investigations. One of them we did involved combustion. We've done a lot of combustion work in space. And I think you're all familiar with the shape of a candle flame coming up to a point, because here on Earth, hot air rises because it's lighter and it draws the flame up to a point. In space, a flame will burn perfectly round. And what you're looking at in this picture is a little pink droplet of butane fuel, like what we have in a disposable lighter. And that blue ball or halo you see there is the flame burning. And it'll just float in the air, burn perfectly spherical like that, consume all the oxygen, and then it'll self-extinguish and go out. So we do investigations of fires like this, just trying to understand some of the basic fundamentals of combustion. We also take up a lot of plants and animals to space. This is a Japanese red-bellied newt, like a salamander. It would lay eggs. We'd put the eggs in little chambers and just photograph them, watching every day how they grow and develop in zero gravity. This is Chaki Mukai, the first Japanese woman in space, and I flew with her on my first flight. And in space, you know, it's just a little push with your finger and you sail through the air. And if you like doing somersaults, you can start flipping around and you'll just go round and round all day until you reach out to stop your motion. So space is a really fun, comfortable environment to be in. And this is a picture of Susan Still, the pilot on my last flight, and she's typing on a laptop computer there on the right-hand side. And I want to point out one feature. If you look at her toes there, she's got her toes hooked on a vertical gold pole. If she didn't do that with her toes, every time she would hit the keyboard on the computer, she would bounce off in the opposite direction. One of Newton's laws, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But if she just pinches her toes a little bit, she can stay in position and float in the air all day long. And in space, there's no up or down. I think we pretty much agree which way is up and which way is down here today, but in space, there is no up or down. And you know, here on Earth, if you stand on your head, all the blood rushes to your head because of gravity. That doesn't happen in space. You go upside down, you feel totally normal. And wherever your head is pointed in space, that direction is up for you. Wherever your feet are pointed, that's down. So you never feel like you're upside down. It's everybody else in the room. And exercise is really important in space. As I stand up here in front of you this morning, I'm using my leg muscles to fight gravity to walk around. But in space, it's a little push with my finger, and I just sail through the air. And everything is weightless up there. I could lift this podium with one finger in space. So we don't use our muscles at all. Very important exercise. We had this bicycle we'd ride on the space shuttle and exercise for like 45 minutes a day just to get your heart muscle going, get your leg muscles working, so that when you come back to Earth at the end of the mission, you're still in good shape. Sleeping's a little different. Inside of the shuttle was pretty small, and we didn't have dedicated bedrooms, so when it was time to go to bed, we would just take a sleeping bag, attach it to the wall. You just float up there, slip inside, zip it up, and you go to bed. Very comfortable sleeping in space. And my favorite part of being in space was always looking out the window, looking back at planet Earth. You see a little bit of an image behind us of the beautiful blue Earth, but to see it with your own eyes from space, it takes your breath away. So I'm looking out one of the rear windows of the shuttle. I've got a map in my hand there, and I took a camera right up to that window and took a picture so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. And this is the view out the back. So that's the Earth from 200 miles up. All the blue in the background is the Pacific Ocean. On the right-hand side, that peninsula coming down is Baja California. So San Diego would be just to the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner of that picture. And if you look very carefully near the bottom edge of the picture, you may see a little thin blue line either to the left or to the right of the space shuttle, and that is our atmosphere. On a nice sunny day in Washington like we have here, you look up at that blue sky, and it looks like it goes on forever and ever. From space, we see the atmosphere edge on. And it appears, just as you see here, as a paper-thin layer. You know, and that's one of the most striking things when you look out the window the first time. You just gasp at the beauty of the Earth and how fragile our planet is. Here's a giant hurricane. This was over the Pacific, a big storm about 400 miles across. We flew right over the center of it, over the eye, and could take pictures back looking right inside of it. And that's the eye looking straight down from directly overhead. Here's a volcano venting steam. This is in the South Pacific near Indonesia. And here you see the Himalaya mountains. And right here at the very center is Mount Everest. And you can see the very top of Mount Everest right there and right there. Now, I can stand up here in front of you and tell you without lying, I have seen the top of Mount Everest with my own eyes about 25 times during my missions. I'm sensing you're not too impressed by this here today. I call it the lazy man's way to see the top of Mount Everest, right? No climbing involved. But I use this picture to illustrate some of the things I got to see and do. I've never climbed Mount Everest, never will in my lifetime, but I've seen the top of it many times. I've seen the Great Barrier Reef, the Amazon rainforest, Mount Kilimanjaro, so many amazing sights around planet Earth. And here's a sunrise from space. Because we go around the Earth every hour and a half, we see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every 24-hour day. And they're all spectacular. I tried to see as many of these as I could from space. At the end of the mission, it would be time to come home. We'd fire 2 engines in the back of the shuttle, slow our speed down just a couple hundred miles an hour, but that would be enough for gravity to start pulling us back to Earth. And about an hour later, we would touch down at the Kennedy Space Center, landing on a nice long runway, deploying a drag parachute. We'd roll to a stop and just sit there and wait for them to open the hatch. And typically, it would be about an hour before they open the hatch and you can get out. When you first come back from space, you feel like you weigh about 2,000 pounds because you've been floating around weightless for 2 weeks, and then suddenly you come back to this pull of gravity, just a normal pull we feel in here today, but it felt so heavy for me. You know, my arms were heavy, my legs were heavy, I was a little dizzy when I got back, and it took about a day or so for that dizziness to go away, and maybe 4 or 5 days to get your muscle strength back, and then you're pretty much back to normal. So I just want to hit on a few things here. One last point is, today at NASA, we're building the new Space Launch System rockets. Space shuttles are all in the museums. We've got Space Shuttle Discovery out by Dulles Airport. And these new rockets, Space Launch System, will be the biggest, most powerful rockets ever made. And instead of flying shuttles, we'll be flying capsules again, like we did during the Apollo program. And with these capsules and these new rockets, we're going to be sending astronauts to destinations like you see here. Maybe to the moon, maybe to visit asteroids, and then on to that red planet Mars. So here's just an artist's drawing of maybe landing crews on the surface of the moon. We'd like to build a lunar base there to learn to live independent of Earth. Here's a mission to one of the asteroids. It'd be great to bring back samples of the asteroids. These are early remnants of our solar system. Here's a mission to one of the moons of Mars. And maybe 20, 25 years from now, we hope to land astronauts onto the surface of Mars. And this is an artist's drawing of that day, so you see the landing craft, and just to the right of it, you see the shadowy figure of 2 humans, the first 2 humans setting foot on Mars. And those astronauts walking on Mars are not this generation. Those astronauts that you see in this picture are our young students here today. We call you the Mars generation. I'm too old to go to Mars, but you are the perfect age to be these astronauts in the future. So we are working today on the rockets, the spacesuits, our habitats. We're going to have these components ready. That's why we need you working hard today also, studying hard in math, science, all your STEM subjects. We want you to be ready to help us as scientists, engineers, and astronauts as we go on to explore the rest of our solar system. So Jeff, I thank you again for inviting me to be part of this great conference, and to all of our students, I wish you great success. It's been a great honor for me to be here, and I thank you all very much for your attention today. Thank you all. Thank you.
John, do you want to take a couple of questions? Anybody have any questions for Dr. Thomas?
I didn't want to get you off schedule, you know.
Well, I think this is like a pretty special time, so go for it.
After having been rejected for the 3rd time, after you'd learned how to scuba dive and skydive and got your pilot's license, what were those other incremental things? You said moving to Houston.
Moving to Houston, I think, was the big one that put me over the edge. Because if you move down there, they'll get more familiar with you. Mm-hmm. That's always a double-edged sword. If they get to know you and they don't like you,
Okay.
that could be a negative thing. But if they get to know you and they do like you, that's a positive. So I got to work with a number of the astronauts when I was down there working as a materials engineer, and I think that just helped get me a little closer.
And would you suggest specifically Houston, or would working for JPL or Johnson or Langley
You know,
be-
all the NASA centers are good, and this is 25, 30 years ago when I looked at the numbers. Most of them were coming from the Johnson Space Center. I don't know what the numbers are today, but just having any experience, you know, any space experience, whether you're working at a university, that would help. But one of the NASA centers, you know, working there, getting operational experience, maybe working in mission control, that's always a plus, I think, in the selection process.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. This is going to be a good one.
So I have a lot of dreams, and a lot of people tell me every day, you know, that I'm not going to be able to accomplish them, and that's, you know, that's fine, because if that's how they feel. However, I use the word will a lot, and so I will accomplish my dreams, and I'll do whatever I need to do. And I would just sort of like to ask you, what do you think would be a good sort of thing for me to keep in the heart while I go on my my sort of life journey?
Okay, many people will tell you you can't do something, you know, in your life. And when I was in high school, you know, I would tell my friends, I want to be an astronaut. I want to walk on the moon. I was just entering 9th grade when Neil Armstrong was on the moon. And when I would tell my friends that, they would just laugh at me and say, you can't do that. You're not smart enough, tall enough, fast enough, whatever enough. So make sure you never listen to those people who tell you you can't do something. You know, it does take hard work to get there. It takes time. I told you I was 39 when this dream came true. But you can accomplish anything. So what I would do is just, like, why didn't I just totally give up after that 3rd time? Because I still had that passion. And I watched what the astronauts were doing. Every space shuttle mission was better than the one before it. And I just wanted to be a part of that. And so I would say never let anybody, you know, pour cold water on your dream. You just keep working hard towards that. Your multiple dreams, as you mentioned, too. So just never give up on those. Every morning when you get up, just think about, how can I make myself a better candidate? How can I get closer to achieving that dream, and focus on that and work on that. But never give up, I think, is the most important message.
Yes, sir.
Good luck to you. See, in space, you get about 2 inches taller. It would be not a problem here.
So what was your schedule like on the ISS?
Okay, I was on the space shuttle, not the ISS, but it's very similar. We work on a 24-hour day up there. They give us 7 or 8 hours to sleep in the morning when we get up. They give you an hour to get up, you know, clean up, brush your teeth, have breakfast, check the messages, you know, of what you're going to be doing for the day. And then we work typically probably 12, 13-hour day. They give us an hour break for lunch, and we would just typically take our lunch and go to the window and watch the Earth go by during our lunch break. We get an hour to exercise, things like that. And then at the end of the day, you know, maybe you have an hour and a half before it's time to go to bed, and you can send a few messages home or look out the window. So it's a very busy day. On the space shuttle, every minute of our day was pre-planned and scheduled. Up on the space station, because our astronauts are up there for 6, 12 months at a time, they give them a little bit more leeway. They'll say, we want you to accomplish these activities today sometime, and they let them decide, you know, what order they're going to do it in, unless it's something very time critical.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're very welcome. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Thomas, and thank you. I'm here with my son and my daughter, and I think your story is a real testament to what I tell them all the time, and that is the only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary, and your application in your school and never giving up really, really solidifies my message to them, so thank you.
You're very welcome. And it does take the hard work. You know, this stuff doesn't come easy. So thank you all very much. It's been a great honor. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.